The needle is thinner than a human hair, yet it carries enough power to rewrite the fundamental source code of a living organism. My hand is steady, though the air in this garage is thick with the scent of ozone and stale coffee. Outside, the world moves at its usual, frantic pace. People commuting, algorithms predicting their next purchase, the hum of a society that believes it is in control. But here, in the dim light of a flickering neon tube, I am about to do something that evolution spent billions of years perfecting through trial and error. I am about to edit the blueprint of my own existence. We were promised that the future would arrive in sleek, glass-walled laboratories staffed by titans of industry and Nobel laureates. We were told that the secrets of life were locked behind high security gates, guarded by ethics committees and international treaties. They lied. The gate is wide open, and it is sitting on a workbench next to a soldering iron and a half-finished 3D printer. For a few $100s, in the unregulated shadows of the internet, I purchased a kit that puts the power of a god into the hands of an amateur. This is not science fiction. This is the new reality of the garage gods. For decades, we've been obsessed with artificial intelligence, fearing the day when a machine might surpass human intellect. We watch the rise of humanoid robots and the silent creep of surveillance algorithms with a mix of awe and dread. But while we were looking at the screen, we ignored the code in our own blood. We are moving past the era of software engineering and into the age of biological hacking. We are transitioning from a species that adapts to its environment to a species that forces its environment and its own anatomy to adapt to its whims. There is a strange, intoxicating silence when you realize that you are no longer a subject of nature, but an architect of it. In the traditional sense, we are all products of a random, chaotic lottery. A genetic roll of the dice determines your height, your predispositions, your limitations. But what happens when the dice are no longer random? What happens when the biological software that defines us becomes open source? The implications are not just medical, they are existential. When you strip away the institutional oversight, when you remove the barriers of entry, you are left with a raw, terrifying democratization of biology. It is the ultimate cyberpunk nightmare. We are building a world where the gap between the haves and the have-nots is no longer measured in currency, but in the quality of one's genetic expression. Imagine a future where your job prospects, your lifespan, and even your cognitive capacity are determined by how much you are willing to risk in a basement experiment. We are currently standing on the precipice of a radical transformation. The tools are here. The knowledge is leaking out of the ivory towers and into the hands of the curious, the desperate, and the reckless. There is no going back to a time when we were mere spectators of our own evolution. The God protocol has been activated. And as I press the plunger, feeling the cold liquid enter my bloodstream, I realize that I am no longer just a person. I am a beta test. I am the first iteration of a new, unregulated humanity, stepping out of the garage and into a future where the line between creator and creation has been permanently erased. The question isn't whether we should have this power. The question is what happens to a species that decides it no longer wants to wait for nature to decide its fate.
Kalau kalian suka cerita seperti ini, pastikan sudah subscribe ya. Sampai jumpa di part selanjutnya. Kira-kira apa yang bakal terjadi selanjutnya?
Tulis teori kalian di bawah. Klik like dan subscribe juga ya. The box arrived on a Tuesday, wrapped in plain, nondescript cardboard. No warning labels, no biohazard warnings, just a return address from a suburban warehouse in the middle of nowhere. Inside, nestled in dry ice, was the future of human evolution. A set of vials, a pipette, and a plastic centrifuge. Total cost? Less than a weekend getaway. It was the democratization of godhood, sold with the same casual indifference as a kitchen appliance. We are living through the era of the garage gods. For decades, the ability to edit the source code of life was locked behind the high security gates of billion-dollar pharmaceutical fortresses and Ivy League laboratories. It was a domain guarded by ethics boards, peer reviews, and the slow, grinding machinery of federal regulation. But the gates have been kicked open. The barrier to entry isn't a PhD anymore, it's a credit card and a browser history. This isn't just about science. It is about the commodification of the biological self. When you can purchase a CRISPR kit online, you aren't just buying a tool. You are buying the right to bypass the natural order. These companies market themselves as pioneers, the champions of open source biology, promising to put the power of the double helix into the hands of the masses. They call it empowerment. But look closer at the fine print, or the lack thereof, and you realize you are staring into a void of zero accountability. There is a chilling irony in how this trade operates. These kits are often shipped with a disclaimer, a thin veil of legal protection that essentially says, do not use this on humans. But in the privacy of a garage, beneath the hum of a flickering fluorescent light, who is watching? The regulatory bodies are decades behind the curve. They are still debating the ethics of gene editing, while the tools are already being used in basements to experiment on everything from bacteria to DIY genetic hacks. It is a cyberpunk reality we've walked into with our eyes wide open. We have become accustomed to the idea that data is currency, that our digital footprints are monitored, harvested, and sold. But now we are treating our own biological blueprints with the same reckless abandon. By purchasing these unregulated kits, we are participating in a grand, uncontrolled experiment, where the test subjects are ourselves. We are turning our bodies into beta software, pushing updates to our own DNA without understanding the legacy code we might be overwriting. The danger isn't just in the potential for a mistake, a mutation that doesn't go quite as planned. The real danger is the normalization of the extraordinary. When the fundamental building blocks of life are treated as a consumer product, the sanctity of the human condition begins to erode. If you can change your genetic code for the price of a mid-range smartphone, what happens to the concept of the individual? What happens when the biological lottery is replaced by a shopping cart? There is no oversight here, no safety net, no one to call when the experiment goes sideways in the middle of the night. We are witnessing the birth of a new kind of shadow economy, one that operates in the gray areas of the law, fueled by the hubris of amateur biohackers who believe they can outsmart 4 billion years of evolution. As I sat there, the kit open on my workbench, I felt the weight of it. It wasn't the thrill of discovery. It was the realization that I was holding the key to a door that, once opened, could never be closed. We are rushing toward a future where our identity is no longer a birthright, but a modification. And as we continue to rewrite ourselves piece by piece in the silence of our garages, we have to ask ourselves a terrifying question. Once we have finished editing the human, will there be anything left of humanity worth saving? The kit is sitting there, ready. The liquid in the vial is clear, almost innocent.
But in that silence, I hear the ghost of 1,000 unintended consequences. We are playing with fire, and the smoke is already filling the room.
The dream of human perfection was never born in a garage. It was born in the glass-walled boardrooms of Silicon Valley, where the air smells of expensive espresso and the ambition is measured in centuries, not fiscal quarters. For decades, the titans of industry have whispered about the singularity, that inevitable horizon where biology meets the machine. But while the public was distracted by smartphones and social media algorithms, a more profound shift was happening in the shadows of the tech elite. They weren't just interested in building better computers, they were interested in building better humans. This is the legacy of the transhumanist movement. A philosophy that views the human body not as a sacred vessel, but as a piece of legacy hardware, buggy, prone to crashes, and long overdue for an update. When this ideology leaked from the elite research labs into the suburban sprawl, it didn't just stay in the ivory towers. It traveled through encrypted forums and open-source manifestos until it reached the hands of the biohacker. What we are witnessing is the democratization of divinity. In the past, if you wanted to rewrite the code of life, you needed a PhD, a multi-million-dollar grant, and the approval of a dozen ethical review boards. Today, you only need a credit card and a shipping address. This is the Silicon Valley shadow. The belief that if something can be done, it must be done. And if the law is too slow to catch up, then the law is simply an obstacle to be bypassed. The garage has become the new cathedral. Inside these suburban laboratories, the motivation isn't just curiosity. It is a desperate, frantic race against the obsolescence of the human condition. These biohackers are the pioneers of a new, unregulated frontier, where the boundary between patient and doctor has been erased. They aren't looking to cure diseases in the traditional sense. They are looking to optimize their own DNA for performance, for longevity, and for a sense of control in a world that feels increasingly automated and cold. But there is a chilling irony here. By attempting to take control of their own evolution, these individuals are inadvertently feeding the very machine they claim to be escaping. We are living in a cyberpunk reality where data is the new currency and where genetic code is the ultimate data set. When you upload your biological sequences to an unverified online database, or when you use a kit from an anonymous supplier, you aren't just hacking your body. You are handing over the blueprint of your existence to a black market that doesn't care about your health, only about the information they can harvest. We are moving toward a future of biological stratification. Imagine a world where the ability to edit your DNA is a luxury good, a subscription service for the wealthy that creates a permanent genetic divide between those who can afford to upgrade their biology and those who are left to the whims of natural selection. This isn't science fiction anymore. It is the logical conclusion of a culture that believes everything, even the human soul, is just a series of sequences waiting to be optimized. The tragedy is that in our rush to become something more than human, we are losing the very things that make us human. We are trading the messy, unpredictable beauty of our natural existence for a sterilized, manufactured perfection. We are becoming the architects of our own dystopia, building a world where the most intimate parts of ourselves are treated like software updates, easily overwritten and sold to the highest bidder. As we stand on this precipice, we have to ask ourselves if we are actually in control, or if we have simply become the latest product in a tech-driven market that views our very biology as a glitch. The garage doors are closing, the incubators are humming, and the code is being rewritten.
But when the experiment is over and the dust settles, will we still recognize the creature staring back at us in the mirror? Or will we have finally succeeded in turning ourselves into the very thing we feared most, a carbon-based machine, perfectly efficient, entirely compliant, and hollowed out from within?
The line between a laboratory and a basement has officially dissolved. We once believed that the code of life was a fortress guarded by the high priests of academia and the sterile walls of billion-dollar institutions. But we were wrong. The fortress has been breached, not by an army, but by a digital underground, a biological black market where the currency is your own genome and the cost is your humanity. Welcome to the shadow economy of the 21st century. Here, the tools to edit the very essence of your existence are no longer locked in vaults. They are traded in encrypted chat rooms, shipped in unmarked thermal packages, and delivered to doorsteps in suburban neighborhoods that look exactly like yours. This is not science in the service of medicine. This is science as an act of rebellion. When you strip away the regulation, you find a culture obsessed with the concept of the self-made God.
In these digital dens, the quest for human perfection has bypassed the slow, tedious crawl of clinical trials. Why wait a decade for the FDA to approve a treatment when you can order a vial of custom synthesized CRISPR-Cas9 from a nameless vendor in a jurisdiction where the law hasn't caught up to the technology? The risk is no longer a theoretical debate. It is a tangible, silent threat. Within these underground circles, permanent, irreversible mutations are treated as little more than a minor inconvenience, a bug in the software that can be patched in the next iteration. They talk about off-target effects and genomic instability the way a hobbyist talks about a faulty motherboard. But you cannot simply hit reset when your biology begins to rewrite itself in ways you never authorized. Imagine the arrogance of it. To sit in a dimly lit garage, the hum of a cooling fan the only witness, and to introduce an enzyme into your own bloodstream that will slice through your DNA with the precision of a scalpel. You are playing a game of genetic Russian roulette where the chamber is loaded with the fundamental building blocks of who you are. The tragedy is that these people are not villains. They are true believers. They are the pioneers of a new dangerous frontier, driven by a desperate hunger to transcend the limitations of the flesh. They believe they are liberating themselves from the tyranny of their own inheritance. But in the pursuit of the upgrade, they have lost sight of the system's complexity. The human genome is not a collection of isolated files you can edit at will. It is a hyper-connected, ancient architecture, refined over millions of years of evolution. When you pull a thread in one place, you unravel the tapestry in another. These garage-born architects are performing surgery on a masterpiece they barely understand, blinded by the neon glow of a technological utopia that promises a future without sickness or decay. The dark truth is that this market thrives because we are terrified of our own mortality. We are so afraid of the inevitable decline that we are willing to gamble with the integrity of our own species. We are turning our bodies into beta test versions of a product that is currently being built in the dark. As the borders between the organic and the synthetic continue to blur, we find ourselves standing on the edge of a precipice. We have unlocked the power to rewrite our source code, but we have yet to develop the wisdom to know what we should change, or more importantly, what we should leave untouched. The garage gods are already at work, and the changes they are making are not just skin deep. They are etching their ambitions into the very marrow of our future, creating a world where the line between evolution and extinction is thinner than a strand of DNA. We are no longer waiting for the future to happen to us.
We're hacking it, one mistake at a time, oblivious to the fact that once you rewrite the code, there is no going back to the original version. The upgrade is permanent, and the consequences are just beginning to unfold.
The hum of the basement freezer was the only sound that kept me company during those long, sleepless nights. It was a rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat, a constant reminder that I was playing God in a space designed for lawnmowers and forgotten holiday decorations. I thought I was a pioneer. I thought I was standing on the precipice of a new human evolution, holding the pen that would rewrite the messy, error-prone manuscript of my own biology. I was wrong. The mistake didn't happen with a loud explosion or a dramatic surge of sparks. It happened in the silence of a micropipette, a fraction of a milliliter off target, a sequence that drifted into the wrong corridor of my cellular architecture. When the sequencing results finally blinked onto my monitor, the world didn't end. There was no siren, no flashing red light, just a string of data that looked perfectly normal to an amateur eye, yet carried the weight of a death sentence for the natural order. I had breached the germline. In the pursuit of optimizing my own existence, I had introduced a permanent mutation, a digital ghost in the machine of my own inheritance. It wasn't just a quirk or a minor adjustment to my pigment or my metabolic speed. It was a systemic error, a corrupted line of code that would now replicate with every cell division. I had turned my body into a living, breathing sandbox for an experiment that could never be undone. The realization was colder than the liquid nitrogen I kept in the corner. I had moved beyond the realm of medical science and stepped into the territory of biological permanence.
This is the dark promise of the garage biotech revolution. We tell ourselves that we are democratizing science, that we are breaking the monopoly of the ivory tower. But in our rush to become the architects of our own hardware, we forgot that nature doesn't have a recycle bin. Once the genie is out of the vial, it doesn't just grant wishes, it reconfigures the landscape. We are living in a cyberpunk reality where the most dangerous surveillance isn't the camera on the street corner, but the sequence inside our own veins. We are becoming the first generation of humans to treat our ancestors' legacy as a beta version, and we are finding out exactly how much we don't understand about the source code. Look around at the trajectory of our silicon-obsessed culture. We have already handed our memories to the cloud, our decisions to the algorithms, and our social lives to the networks. Now we are reaching for the final frontier, the biological substrate itself. We are convinced that we can patch the bugs, that we can optimize our way out of mortality, that we can code our way into a superior version of humanity. But what happens when the patch fails? What happens when we realize that the human condition wasn't a flaw to be fixed, but a delicate balance that we were never meant to disrupt? I look at my hands now, and I don't see the same person I was a year ago. I see a vessel of unintended consequences. There is a haunting beauty to the idea that we are no longer purely the product of nature, but we have yet to become the masters of our design. We are caught in the middle, a transitionary species, glitching in the light of our own ambition. The garage is quiet now, the equipment sits dormant, but the change has already taken root. We are moving toward a future where our identity is no longer a birthright, but a manufacturing choice.
And as we stand on this threshold, we have to ask ourselves if we are actually upgrading humanity, or if we are simply creating a new kind of dystopia. One where the most profound human experience is no longer about living, but about debugging. Whispering. Finality. Perhaps we were never meant to have the source code. Perhaps the greatest error wasn't in my experiment, but in the belief that we could ever be anything more than the sum of our flaws. We are the design, and we are the defect, and the future is waiting to see if we can live with the wreckage we've created in the dark.